So this is a bit complicated even for me. So listen carefully. So you've been vaccinated and you're excited about finally venting out those long months of being followed and in the frustration. However, there are some changes in rules that you need to know. At present, if you're traveling from an amber or red list country, you would have to self-isolate for 10 days. If you're traveling from a green list country, you do not have to isolate for 10 days, but you still have to do your COVID tests. From July 19, if you're fully vaccinated, i.e. you've had the double jabs, you can return from an amber list country without having to self-isolate for 10 days. However, you still need to do a COVID test 3 days pre-departure, as well as a day 2 COVID test, but no need to do a day 8 COVID test. You still have to pay for the COVID test, which can cost anything between £60 to £200 depending on the company that you use. Anyone under the age of 18 would also not need to self-isolate for 10 days, so if you're traveling with children, there is no need for them to quarantine or miss school. Children aged 4 and under would not need to do a day 2 test on arrival. Children aged 10 and under would not need to do a 3 days pre-departure test. However, they will still have to do a day 2 COVID test, but no need to do a day 8 COVID test. And your children do not have to be vaccinated under the new rules. So let's say you're traveling with a family of 5, 2 adults and 3 kids over the age of 10. Let's price the COVID test at £80. I mean, you could end up paying £1,600 in total on COVID test alone. I mean, that could easily be more than the price of the travel ticket, depending on if you had a good summer holiday deal, which is very unlikely. Also bear in mind that some countries have their own travel rules and they would want you to do a day 7 test on arrival in addition to doing your 3 days pre-departure test. So again, if you price that at £100 for each person, that's over £2,000 in total. Well, I'm staying put. Unless, you have 2 stroppy teenagers and you can leave them with their relatives. That's just a suggestion. So £2,000 for somebody to swab the back of my mouth with a stick that looks like it came from Pound Shop. And no, you cannot do these tests under the NHS, as you will need to do it privately and show a certificate. There are also 2 important points here. 1, you would have had to have your second dose of the vaccine 14 days before you travel. And you can do this by showing the COVID NHS app. And the reason why it's 14 days before you travel is usually that's when the window of the protection kicks in. 2, you've had to have been vaccinated in the UK. But this is subject to change for foreigners coming from abroad. So for example, if you had the AZ vaccine in India, which is done by a different company, not the Oxford AstraZeneca, you still have to self-isolate and pay for the COVID tests. So I got this from the BBC News website. For example, all non-vaccinated travellers to mainland Portugal need a negative COVID test and must quarantine for 14 days. 12 to 17-year-olds travelling with fully vaccinated parents don't have to quarantine, but need a negative test. Under 11s are exempt. Only fully vaccinated adults can travel to Malta and do not need a negative test. Children aged 5 to 11 can travel with fully vaccinated adults but need a negative test. Under 5s do not need a test. Unvaccinated 12 to 17-year-olds cannot enter. Over 12s traveling to Spain need a negative test or proof of vaccination. Unvaccinated travelers can only enter France for essential reasons and must self-isolate for 7 days. Fully vaccinated adults with a negative test can enter. Under 18s traveling with fully vaccinated adults do not need to isolate. So you can see, as I said, every country has its own travel rules. You have to look this up before you travel because it's quite complicated, especially if you're traveling with people of different ages, from the age of 4 to the age of 18. Different rules, different tests, different rules of isolation. It's confusing. So it's not just holidays that are affected, also business trips. I mean, gone are the days you can travel to and fro from New York or Paris twice a week. I mean, you cannot have a face-to-face meeting if you have to stay in a hotel for 10 days. Also be aware that any green list country can become amber and any amber list country can become red at any time. So travel at your own risk. If you disobey the quarantine rules, then you face a fine of £10,000. So in all, if you've paid £4,000 for a holiday, £2,000 for COVID tests, and then you come back, you're meant to be self-isolating, you decide to take a walk in the park just to get a breath of fresh air for 5 minutes, track and trace come knocking at your door, bad timing, you're not there, then you find £10,000, and that's a total of £16,000, just for a bit of summer fun and a 5-minute walk in the park. 16 grand. Someone here is making silly money. It's not you traveling, and it's definitely not me. So it's looking like the real perk of vaccination in terms of travel, apart from the risk of reducing COVID, is that you do not have to self-isolate. However, each country has its own travel rules that might render your vaccination status redundant. So just unpack your bags and travel. Do your research, because the rules are constantly changing, and by next week, this video will be old news. Well, I hope this is all clear. I'm sure by next week the rules are going to change again in terms of countries that you can travel to. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe to my channel.